Welcome to Ignatius Press Off the Shelf. We hope to conclude our discussion of The Wedding of Magdeburg by Goethe von Lefort. Like a great symphony, all the themes come together, converge at this wonderful ending. We stopped around page 205, and so I turn it over to you, Vivian, to lead us.
Well, Joseph...
Not into temptation.
Heavens, no. Joseph, we left off with you, I think, pointing out the beautiful metaphor of the logs in the fireplace and how what was going on in the fireplace was being mirrored in the room of what was going on with these men. And we left off with the city council explaining why they're still waiting for the Swedish king to rescue them. And really, it's on page 207. I'd like to turn our attention because they reply to Willigis, who's begging them to surrender to save their wives and their children and their homes. And on that first large paragraph on 207, they, meaning the city council, replied that as long as His Imperial Majesty could not separate them, meaning church and state, the rebellion would persist. What a man believed was a matter not for His Imperial Majesty, but for God. And if His Imperial Majesty was unable to accept that, if he insisted on using worldly means, violence, and oppression of every kind in order to achieve unity in faith and spirit, then His Imperial Majesty was bound to learn that not only would unity in faith and spirit not thereby be achieved, but that the body of the country would be torn to bloody shreds in the process. So these men, I mean, it seems sort of shocking what these men, the city council, are willing to sacrifice for their conscience.
And again, the next paragraph there. So that basically encompasses and encapsulates their position, but also I think it has a prophetic element because that's what happened, of course, to history. That the 30 Years' War did not bring unity; it just accentuated division. That the use of force to enforce faith doesn't work. But see, again, we come back to the thing about the flame. Look what happens immediately after that paragraph, which you just read. The flame of the place suddenly caught a rush of air and blazed high. Again, it was as though the great show booth of war opened up in the dim room, as though painted in the scene. They beheld the entire horizon, as far as the eye could see, covered in the glow of flames. They again beheld the city of Magdeburg as the sacrificial flame of this war, igniting everything it touched. But then at the end, they'll skip a bit. They beheld the whole empire as a future pile of rubble.
Yes, that's right. And von Lefort has the benefit of knowing the history to know that that's exactly what the 30 Years' War ended up producing, the ruin of the Holy Roman Empire. And that's why General Tilly was willing to switch from fighting a religious war to fighting a territorial war, because he realized that if you persist in this manner of trying to force people to adopt certain beliefs or reject certain beliefs at the point of a sword, you're just going to get a rebellion on your hands. And now your wins, such as they might be, will only be losses, because in the end, the whole thing will just fall apart. And that's what happened. So then where do we go from here? Even though Willigis continues to try to persuade them, explaining that, look, the Swede isn't going to save the faith either. And that's on page 211. And we've already seen that Colonel Falkenberg, who's running the city's defense on behalf of Sweden, has already become a tyrant himself. He's not going to allow them religious freedom either. So they're really caught between a
rock and a hard place.
Rock and a hard place. That here they wish to make a stand on conscience, and yet the very people they're siding with against the Holy Roman Empire, they're not going to respect their conscience either. And this is the great tragedy of the whole thing. And then it's beautiful then on 211 down toward the bottom. Well, from the middle to the bottom, where Willigis is saying, the Swede will not save the faith either, for how could he save it? After all, the faith can be saved only by God alone. Willigis paused. There it was, the answer he'd been searching for but couldn't remember, and so on. And then he recalls the thicket that he and General Tilly were in together, right, in that meeting in Hamelin before the siege. And so then it's the city council who say that sounds nice, but he had to consider the difficult plight already faced by the faith in those parts of the country where the edict was being carried out and what it was like to be driven back. It would be contrary to all experience of this world to suggest that they could survive in such a situation by trusting in God alone. And Willigis's retort, but faith is something that is contrary to all experience of this world. I mean, that.
Yeah, which is beautiful, but it begs questions. Like, I mean, I was thinking of the "Praise the Lord, but pass the ammunition." I think was a song from World War I or World War II, right? That of course you praise the Lord, of course you have faith, but you do have to take practical steps to pursue what is right. So you can't just say, well, you have a quietist approach. We don't need to do anything because God's in charge. That's clearly contrary to faith and works and everything else. So faith is something that is contrary to all experience of this world. I mean, is that strictly true?
Well,
Obviously, history is a means by which we can argue for the existence of God. I mean, we've done the everlasting man on this show. That basically experience does point towards faith. Faith is not something contrary to all experience.
right. But I think what he's talking about is the experience measured by a worldly measure, because it's not as though Willigis is suggesting, nor General Tilly suggesting that the men just all sit back and do nothing. No, Willigis begged Tilly, who then told his Jesuit chaplain to go to the emperor and talk to him. And part of what we are getting at this huge conflagration at the end of this story is stubborn men refusing to even try because they're standing on principle. And so they're not even trying to bridge the breach or bridge the gap between one position and the other position. They're just going to stand on principle. So if you think about it, it's the men standing on principle who are literally doing nothing to avert the disaster. They refuse to negotiate. They refuse to go and talk to their side. And so I don't think Lafort is arguing here, if you want to call a novel an argument. I don't think she's presenting the choice between faith and doing nothing and being men of worldly experience and common sense doing something. I think she's showing you that the men who claim to be basing their behavior on worldly experience are the ones doing nothing to avert a disaster they could have averted if they'd only tried to talk to each other. Now, even talking to each other and negotiating may fail, but they didn't even bother to try.
Well, it succeeded between Willigis and Tilly.
Yes. Oh, there you go.
But Tilly couldn't transmit that to the emperor, nor could Willigis to the council.
Yes, good point. But at least the two of them, it proves it can happen.
Exactly. And that's why there's a model, in this story.
Beautiful, Father. That's very good.
If well, I'm going to I'll say that I'm going to defer to you, actually, Vivian, because you're the leader here. But I've got something on 213 anyway. If I'll let you.
Well, I was going to go there next too with the Caesar line. Is that where you're going?
That's what I've highlighted. Okay. You go ahead.
Why don't you do it?
You want me to do it?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. So just before the break in the page there, 213, Willigis is speaking here. The city must render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, for otherwise the faith will perish. But Caesar must render to God the things that are God's, for otherwise the empire will perish. I mean, that's a succinct and beautiful encapsulation, not just of of the teaching of Christ, but of the situation politically at the time. That the both of them have to do what their faith commands of them to avert disaster, and they don't.
Right. That's right.
Yes, and that Caesar must render to God, namely, the empire can't try to establish the true faith as it sees it uh, by Caesarian means, that is, by the temporal means. Yeah,
Exactly.
that's a beautiful, typical for poetic prose, very lapidary.
And that's what I love about it as well, because this is a translation, and even in translation, it's a thing of beauty.
Yes, yes, and we've that's been remarked by more than one person that this translation by Chase. How do you trans?
We say Fascia.
Fascio, Chase Fascio. It's a French-looking last name,
Faucheux.
and
Fascia, yeah.
he really did a beautiful job. Yes, I agree.
Onward,
Onward. So where do we want to go next?
up to you.
So so then Colonel von Valkenburg, right when the well, Father, you pointed out that when he gets them alone, the city council, that is, they do start to soften when
That's true.
the standard bearer, the Catholic standard bearer, they leave the room and they do start to soften. Unfortunately, von Valkenburg argues them back into the corner that they're trying to defend, right? And on page 217, he tells them, that is, von Valkenburg tells the city council that this city may be reduced to rubble and ashes, but it must never become an imperial stronghold. So he's perfectly happy to sacrifice the city, and for the sake of this other war that's going on. And then Willig tries to fight back, because the council is about ready to capitulate. And von Valkenburg claims on the top of 218 that any capitulation is invalid. The Swedish commandant is the one who commands here, meaning him. He's actually become an autocrat. Even the city council has no authority.
And
And
he is Caesar. That's the whole point here, right? As
yes,
well. So they have to they've capitulated to Caesar anyway, because von Falkenberg is that. Can I go back very quickly because I just love
yes,
her use of metaphor. Page 216 in the middle. Outside the window, the new day had arrived. On the table, the low burning candles smoldered. One of them had already gone out. Then we have Falkenberg, and then 12 lines up or so from bottom of page 217. Then the door of the council chamber suddenly opened wide, and a breeze blew into the room, extinguishing the candles still smouldering on the table. So, this is
mm-hmm.
the last hope uh, dying, basically.
Right. Well, and musket shots are ringing out now. I mean, by the time this concludes on page 218, this whole back and forth between Willigis and the council, and then Falkenberg stepping in and pushing the council back, it ends with, it's already too late. The Imperials are inside the city. So this smoldering wick and everything, I mean, time's up. She's showing symbolically also that time is up. So,
It's interesting, middle of page 218. This is Willigis here. And I wanted to kill this man, Willigis thought to himself, but he's not even really alive. Why, he doesn't have a human face of flesh and blood. It's as though he's but a spectre of brass and iron. And this was a man Erdmuth could ... So yeah, there's something there is a suggestion of the demonic, right? He's not a demon, it's not a formal allegory, nothing like that. But there is a suggestion that the man's possessed, right? He has basically forsaken all those things which are fully, truly human for this mad monomaniacal idea. And again, I'm reminded of the spectre of Hitler, right? That's in the
Right.
background here as well, right? He's forsaken humanity in this inhumane quest for a monomaniacal idea of 1,000-year Reich, right? Caesar writ large. So their Führer, you know. So that's all in the background to me when I read this.
Well, and when Willigis notes this about von Valkenburg, let's recall that Willigis was very close to becoming just like him, right? When he abandoned his city out of bitterness because they'd gone over to their side and his bride had gone over to the other side. And now he just wanted the city destroyed, right? And it was Tilly who sort of brought him back gradually to at least being willing to go. And then he commanded him in case his willingness wasn't enough, But it was only
That's when
through that.
Tilly's called Father Tilly again, right? This is
Yes,
this
yes. So it was
paternal figure.
only through that errand of mercy, of which Willigis was the bearer, that and the banner of Our Lady, that he gets softened on the way, right? And but when he notes this about von Valkenburg, he could very well have been turned out just like him if he hadn't been sent on this errand of mercy. So then we have the death of von Valkenburg on the bottom of 219. Did anybody think that was important?
You did. You marked it on your sheet here.
I did, because he's slipping away from he sees his life before him and so on. From the day he'd broken free from his mother's arms. That's a theme that Gertrude von Lefort uses over and over and over again, that when a man is completely broken free from the feminine side of the equation, the sexual complementarity of male and female, when a man is just completely cut away from any of that, he actually becomes not just a tough guy, but really a monster, right? And so from the day he'd broken free from his mother's arms up to the moment in this city when he'd found himself again desiring life from a woman, the final thrill before death, and she still owed it to him. I take that line right there to suggest that he and Erdmuth never really consummated their relationship, because remember, right when she seemed willing.
The gunshot saved her, basically.
Yes, correct.
Yeah,
The gunshot saved her, and yet she ends up being taken by other men. But
right.
At least that was against her will, if you want to put it that way, whereas she was willingly at first going to be. Anyway, so he's dying, and I thought it important on 220, it says, like 6 lines down, Falkenberg knew he should pray one more time. He did not pray, however, nor did he feel the desire to do so. This surprised him, for he'd spent his entire life fighting for the gospel and the faith. How could it be then that in his final hour he found himself unable to pray? Had he really spent his life fighting for the gospel? Anyway,
maybe as an idea, right? As an ideology, but not as a lived faith, as something authentically believed.
Right. So, anyone want to say anything more about the death of Falkenberg?
Well, yeah, just further down there, again, more metaphorical symbolism. He's obviously not. He's having an unholy death. He's not repenting. He's not praying. Not asking for mercy. But then, about three quarters of the way down, he went to remove his helmet, which he was no longer wearing, as if to pray. His Royal Majesty has come after all. His Royal Majesty shall find me prepared to live all. So yes, who's he praying to? Right, the King of Sweden. That's ultimately he dies devoted to Caesar.
Yes, good point. Good point. And he thinks when he hears the march that it is the approach of the Swedish king. But as we know, earlier on, the imperial forces decided that they would play the Swedish king's march as they
Finnish,
approached
actually.
the
Yeah.
Finnish march, as a sort of a sick joke, really.
Yeah.
Um,
So he dies disillusioned.
yes. So what's interesting on 221, so Willigis now is in the city. The Imperials are rushing in, pillaging, destroying, killing, raping. And Willigis still has the standard. He's still got the standard of Tilly, the Marian standard of the Blessed Virgin Mary. And on 221 there, about a third of the way up from the bottom, it says Willigis had drawn his rapier ready to protect the flag, meaning the Marian banner, which was being carried by the trumpeter. But soon he realized that the flag was protecting him. And he ends up becoming this place of refuge. So this idea of Our Lady even being a place of refuge for this rebelling, protesting, triumphing city, right? Isn't it beautiful?
There's even this metaphorical allusion to the great sort of iconic works of art where you have the Blessed Virgin with her mantle covering supplicants. Because at Willigis' feet, they're now huddled a throng of trembling women and children, growing larger with each passing moment, as if this spot had been established a place of refuge amid the dreadful horrors of devastation, and it was apparently the only one. So here we have, if in some sense, the banner is the Blessed Virgin, right? It's under her protection that they're all now cowering for to be saved.
And so remember when the Blessed Virgin, obviously in interlocution or whatever, tells Tilly she will only triumph in the love of her son. So here the city is being taken by force, but this place of refuge established under her banner is a place of love in the middle of it all.
Which keeps out the demonic forces unleashed, which is raping and pillaging
Yes,
all
yes,
around. But this is sacred ground, right?
yes.
Now, time is short now.
Okay.
We want to get to in the cathedral.
We want to get to the
this-
cathedral.
And the beautiful climax here.
Right.
I mean, Willigis rescues Erdmuth, who's been raped, brings her into the cathedral.
Yes.
Baki is there with his wife. She's going to bear a child.
Yes. And Willigis wants to marry her right there in the cathedral, asks Bake to do the ceremony. And it's so beautiful that Willigis wants to marry this woman, and she's ashamed, can hardly even look at him. But the most beautiful thing here to me on 227 toward the bottom, he sees how her dirty face. Willigis dipped a corner of his ample riding coat into one of the puddles and began to wash Erdmuth's face with it. Then he took her in his arms and carried her before the altar. I see this as a symbol of absolution, that he has forgiven her without her even asking for it. He has forgiven her, washed her clean, and now takes her to the altar to marry her. That's Jesus. That's what Jesus does for us.
After breaking the text there, the metaphor that von der Fort gives us: 3 days, an eternity, had passed inside the great cathedral when Generalissimo Tilly ordered the survivors of this great flood of fire to come out of their ark. So basically, this is a resurrection. So combined with the marriage, taking her to the altar, the absolution is the resurrection. And so, in fact, the 3 days are even likened to an eternity. Right? It's not. This is not ordinary. These aren't 3 ordinary days.
Right. And do we want to jump then to Bake's wife speaking to General Tilly?
Yes.
Once again, so here, as Father pointed out, she gives birth to a child in the cathedral during the siege of the city. I mean, she was already all through this story in a weakened condition, expecting her 5th child, having all these children to care for. Now you could not be, as a woman, more pathetically weak than after having just given birth to a child, right? And her husband is trying to ask for Tilly's mercy and botching it as we would expect him to. And what does she do? There she stood. This is page 230. There she stood beside her husband, the object of the strange, wrathful Generalissimo's gaze. She wavered somewhat. The 4 children clinging to her skirt. The newborn, 5th, cried softly. She held it in her arms like the uncertain, unsheltered fate of them all. What could be more helpless than a newborn baby? At once, patiently and pleadingly, "Sir," she breathed, "remember your mother." Oh my goodness.
Continue that final paragraph. That's beautiful.
His Excellency gazed fixedly down from his horse at the little haggard girlish face. Suddenly the tears burst forth as he thought at that moment,
As
though at that moment a mass of solid stone shattered behind his aged, lonely eyes.
So here's this old soldier on a horse,
Yeah.
and he's weeping now. Okay, continue.
Tilly, the icy gray Excellency, wept like the little helpless child in the woman's arms. He could utter nothing more than, "Give them all some bread." Then, without taking another look at Bacche, the woman's husband, Excellency turned his horse, and then all at once, indeed, it was really quite strange, his Catholic Excellency looked as though he had his standard back at his side.
His mother.
His mother. I know, it's
Yeah.
It's so then we get Tilly and his Jesuit chaplain, because now there's going to be a mass in the cathedral, and Tilly and his chaplain are both feeling.
Say one thing here. Obviously, we're rushing to finish this, and as we should. I have so much highlighted over these last 10 or 15 pages. It's a beautiful ending. It might be just, I would just say to people that, that we are not doing justice to the climax of this book. So you do have to actually buy the book because we are leaving so much out here of necessity.
Yes, yes. So Joseph, where in all of that highlighting, would you like to take us to make the crucial points?
Well, first we have the conversion of the Jesuit priest, of course. Where are we? So, yes, like page 234, it is precisely when it lies defeated that this love triumphs. It's just about a third of the way down. At the very moment at which the world defeats it, it is then that the world is thrust into that space where its victories cease to matter and where the world is itself redeemed of all its victories.
Redeemed of all its victories.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. What a beautiful paradox. And then but then Teddy says to him, "You have to prepare for mass." Right, the men are expecting a mass. You have to sing the Te Deum, which he doesn't want to do because that's something which is purely joyful, a moment of triumph and joy, and that's not what he feels, quite rightly. But it must be done. And he says that bottom of the page there. It is such defeat that I too must reconcile myself. The Te Deum is a day profundis for me as it is for you. So this great hymn of the church, which is one of joy and triumph, um, uh, resurrection has become something Lenten, right? De profundis, one of the penitential psalms.
Yes, yes, and
Middle of page 236. Sorry.
yes, so keep going.
Yeah, the priest said quietly but loudly enough to hear, "Yes, I know. Mary's banner cannot triumph in any other way than Mary's son. And Mary has triumphed in her son. In the midst of defeat, there is the victory. That is what it looks like."
Yeah.
That sends shivers down me.
Yes, and then we have His Excellency offering to assist the priests at Mass. I served at the altar when I was a boy. This is also on 236, the second to the last full paragraph there. The Tilly is now fathering the priest. He's tenderly caring for the priest. He sees how crushed the priest isn't, realizing his mistake at not trying to save the city by reaching the emperor. Now he sees the devastation of 20,000 dead. And here Tilly is, young man, you have to keep going now. We're going to have to keep going. And then where's that, he asks him, will you be my companion? Where is that? That's, let's see. There's the place where they both agree to be each other's companions still.
While you're looking for that, on page 239 at the bottom, 5 or 6 lines up, now the Erdmuth and Willigis are married, where Bach had just seen the victim of his guilt, that is Erdmuth, because it was Bach who actually promoted this whole Swedish thing in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
His neglected spiritual daughter, and altogether poor, foolish, disgraced virgin, he now saw a parishioner who had been saved. She was now a beloved bride, accepted with love and honor. And so, indeed, Bach thought, when he looked back on that moment, it was also to his own soul.
Yes.
So that's, this whole bridegroom-bride thing, and the soul being the bride of God.
Yes.
And then the next page, the bride is still the bride. After all this Erdmuth has gone through, and all that Magdeburg has gone through, the bride is still the bride. And then in the middle of the page, for the kind of miraculous transformation that Bach had experienced in the great Cathedral Erdmuth wedding ceremony could only ever happen in a place where it was said, love makes all things possible. That ties us back to the plaque that's on top of the Plugger house, the Erdmuth's house. In the world, it was an altogether different matter, for there was said, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, pride for pride. Indeed, what they were truly saying was pride makes all things possible. But no, love overcomes pride at the end of this book.
That's right. And this love makes all things possible. Not only does that harken back to Erdmuth's house, where that's over the door, it also takes us to the Song of Songs, where in that the Lord God is the bridegroom in pursuit of us, his bride.
And now, so Bachi's in the Protestant, the former Catholic cathedral, taken over by the Protestants, among whom he's the minister, and he's going to be there where a mass is being celebrated by the papists,
Mm-hmm.
And 241, a third of the way up, there was no communion to be had with the papists. Bach trembled all the while at the thought of having to hear with his own ears the voices of those wanton men who had marched into his beloved cathedral. So the Catholics have come, the papists have come. And yet, new paragraph, then a voice arose, Credo Unum Deum, I believe in one God. This is going to end on the creed now. And Bach is going to hear the creed sung in his cathedral by the hostile papists, and he's going to realize, wait a minute, we are one.
He's going to realize that's the same creed I believe. And the fact that it ends with Confiteor Unum.
That's not
ready yet.
Not quite ready.
Okay.
240 let's build up to it. 4 lines down. Bach, because he's listening to the creed now, Bach fell to his knees. For the first time in his life, he was shaken to realize that beyond all the things that separated the confessions, there was one singular creed professed by all of Christendom.
Yep.
And then another page. And in an instant, all things were transformed. In place of the great sight where an immense guilt shared by all Christendom had been satisfied, the destroyed Magdeburg, forever separating the Christendom. The destroyed Magdeburg now became the hill of Golgotha, where the whole of Christendom was united. And then the creed, Crucifixus et Sem pro nobis, he was crucified for us under Pontius Pilate and buried. The love of the Lord Jesus Christ had been crucified at Magdeburg, and there was no other hope than that hope which all Christians shared at resurrection, tercidis, he rose the third day, according to the scriptures. I mean, this is so glorious.
It's incredible. It's incredible, which harkens back, Joseph, to you underscoring that the resurrection is alluded to in the cathedral when Willigis and Erdmuth are married, that there's been a death, a rebirth happening on all of these levels.
And so now, at the very end, it's the end of the creed, And Bach himself is going to recite the end of the creed. So there's this union, and he spoke plain and humbly, yet also firmly and clearly, as if his lone voice out there outside the great cathedral filled and confessed the vast expanses of an invisible church. Confiteor unum baptisma remissionem peccator. I confess one baptism for
One
for
baptism.
the forgiveness of sins. Wow.
Yep, one baptism, which is why when, people who've been baptized in other confessions enter the Catholic Church, they're not baptized. Their baptism is already valid. They're already part of the body of Christ.
right.
What's happening is just the restoration of that full communion that was lost.
This, by the way, is she, Gertrude von Lefort, in her prayerful, poetic brilliance, has foreshadowed the Second Vatican Council, which precisely tried to remind us all that there are separated brethren, that we all Christians share the same belief in the one God, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Now, how did it have to wait almost 100 years to get translated?
I know.
Terrible.
One thing as well, just
Fellowship?
one way, before we close, I just want to say that we've talked about how this is a work of poetry as well as prose, with the way she weaves certain motifs. I mean, obviously the Bride and Bridegroom one, especially, but the way the climactic part of the novel, where the Lutheran Baccha is interacting with the beauty of the Mass, beauty of the liturgy, is, I mean, it transcends and supersedes all the previous metaphors. It's as if, it's the best way I could put it is Maurice Baring, the great Catholic novelist and friend of Chesterton and Belloc, said that the great work of art is defined by how it ends, and he uses the example of the Divine Comedy. And the final climactic moments of the Divine Comedy of Dante, and says that was the perfect ending to a perfect poem. I'm tempted to say this is the perfect ending to a perfect novel.
Beautiful.
Is that it?
That's it.
That concludes our discussion. If you haven't got the book and read it yourself, please do so. This is definitely worth the time, worth the effort, worth the money. God bless you all. See you next season.